Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Patty G Show. We are locked and loaded with firearm historian Mike Helms in the studio. We are talking Smith & Wesson, we are talking revolvers, we are talking true American history. As you guessed it, he brought some show and tell. So we've got some really cool things we both look at and talk about in this episode, brought to you by our wonderful Velocity Partners Group sponsors, our title sponsors in the Velocity Partners Group studio, and our wonderful partners in the community, Valaya Real Estate, Lakeman's Health Center, Cortex, and PB&J Productions. Enjoy the show.
You know, I'm really glad you didn't ask me about sports in that intro, because I still, it's one of the few things I haven't, I grew up with hockey. I mean, there was hockey and everything else.
With what?
What's that?
With what?
Hockey.
What's that?
Yeah, exactly. So when people talk about football, I'm like, that's that weird shaped ball, and they kind of spin it when they throw.
Yeah.
It just hasn't
So how excited were you for Zydeco?
Oh, I love Zydeco.
So you were season ticket holder.
Oh, you mean the Zydeco?
The Zydeco, the Zydeco.
I haven't been out and to see them yet. So
how?
Because I live in Louisiana, nobody talks about hockey, so it doesn't
But it's hockey.
Look,
and you're a Canadian.
Look, it's hard. It's hard. No, I do need to get out there sometime. So
yeah, I figured you'd have been oh yeah, season
I know,
ticket holder.
Well, when I heard about it, I was
jersey.
Yeah, I'd be oh, cool, a sport I know something about. and then it fell out of my brain 5 minutes later. So
yeah,
well, short attention span. Look at the kitty.
Yeah.
So.
Look, I'm still learning all the sports, and the only reason I know LSU is because I went there, right? And so that's that kind of got me into the sports. Yeah. So, but we're here to talk about historical things.
We are
not current events.
That's true.
So, who are you and what do you do, man? Let's start there. Let's back up.
Sure. So I'm Mike Helms, and I'm a firearms historian.
How? How does one get into this?
Yeah, it's, this is one of those fields that you don't really wake up one morning and say, I'd like to be a firearms historian, and I'm going to go do, firearms college or something like that.
Wait, there's a firearms college?
No, there isn't. Okay. It's a good idea, though. This all kind of happened by accident. So I mentioned earlier I'm Canadian. So actually born and raised in Canada. I spent 26 years there, and then lived in the States for 24 years now. You can do the math. I just turned 50. My body is starting to fall apart. But I've been a historian all my life. I've always loved history. Even when I was, my mom has this great story she tells that, in kindergarten when we were talking about trains, I wanted to know about the earliest trains. So even then, that was kind of in my bones. And in the 2010s, I decided I wanted to go back to university and finish the degree I had started but never finished, which it went through a lot of metamorphosis, but I ended up doing a history degree. I was living in North Carolina at the time, and as I was sort of approaching my senior year part-time, the topic of writing a thesis came up. And I had just bought at an antique store this antique revolver. I just thought it looked cool. We were up in Northern Virginia near where my wife's family lives, and I bought this at an antique store, and I just thought it was cool. I was going to set it on my desk and, hey, look at this. And I happened to mention to the guy that became my thesis advisor, I said, I bought this old revolver, and it has this name Rollin White on it. And I thought that was, I just thought it was interesting. I had started to read on it, and I said, there might be a story in this. I just had this, call it a psychic feeling that there was something about this that this needs to be researched and it needs to be written about. And my advisor at the time was okay, go do your thing. And I started reading about Rollin White, and that took me into the whole story of how Smith & Wesson was founded in the 1850s, and this, what turned out to be this seminally important time in American history. Of course, it was right before the Civil War, but from a business and an economic and a technological perspective, this was one of the most important decades in the country's history, and most people have no idea about this. This was a time when we really saw the birth of what we would now call the modern business enterprise. There's a whole book about that I'll talk about in a bit, but I got interested in this, and I said to my thesis advisor, we met about a month later, and I said, I think I want to do a thesis. I want to write a thesis about guns and the gun industry. And And he sort of looked at me like a
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, like a three-headed monster. And so, are you sure?
Yeah.
But he was really supportive. He's a super nice guy. We still keep in touch to this day. And so what had happened was this guy named Rollin White. He was sort of one of these kind of perpetual inventors. He was always inventing everything, trying to like find the next big dollar. But he never really found it until this happened. But he invented this really convoluted revolver that was based on a Colt percussion revolver, and it didn't work. I mean, people actually tried to make this revolver based on and it just didn't work. But it had this one aspect that was really important, which was that the cylinder of the revolver was bored all the way through. And if you know anything about, sort of muskets and percussion revolvers and how they work, the end of the revolver was actually closed off. That was how you kept the powder and the ball in there. And he had bored the revolver all the way through. So at the same time, you had these two guys in Springfield, Massachusetts, Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson, who, they didn't invent the revolver and they didn't invent the metallic cartridge, but they were the first ones to sort of put the two together and say, hey, this could really work. This could be something. And their attorney went out and did a patent search on it. And he said, well, wait a second, there's this guy, Rollin White, and he has this kind of sketchy patent that doesn't really work, but it has the bored through cylinder in it. I think this might already be patented. You need to talk to this guy and see if you can work out some sort of deal. So they did, and they exclusively licensed the patent, and that was the birth of the Smith & Wesson company. Of course, it was a phenomenally successful design. Smith & Wesson really sort of came up with the we'll call it the recipe for the revolver that worked, and to this day, that's still how revolvers work, is you have a metallic cartridge that you put in the back of the cylinder, and that's how you load it and shoot it. So I wrote my history thesis on this. It took me 2.5 years. I was a part-time student at the time. It took me 2.5 years to finish it and defend it and get it through the system. But what was really curious about that was I became one of the only, I don't want to say the only, but one of the only people who's ever written an academic thesis on firearms, but more from a commercial perspective, not from a military perspective. It sort of made me this kind of oddity, and people started to notice that. So I had, strangely, I had a couple of government agencies reach out to me to do some contracting work for them. I sort of stumbled into doing some expert witness work because I was one of the few people with some academic credential in this space who had expertise in historic firearms. And I also got involved in the collecting community at that point. Lots of people have written lots of books about the history of guns. That's nothing new, but nobody had ever come at it from this kind of academic angle. And as my thesis advisor always told me, he said, look outwards with the history. So think about, why is this important economically? Why is it important politically? Why is it important socially? And I was doing that at the time. That made my research really different than most people who write about old guns, which is just, oh, cool. And they kind of look inward to the company and the technology and the guns, but they're maybe not looking out kind of with this bigger picture. So, like I said before, when I got into this, I had no intention of becoming a firearms historian. It just kind of happened by accident. And it was really accidental, sort of this commercial angle that I took with it. But it took off. I started doing contract research for people, the expert witness work, and it just sort of blossomed into a little business of its own. And, here I am, I guess 9 years after defending my thesis and still going strong with it. And again, I certainly don't want to say I'm the only person in the space. There's definitely other historians doing research on this, but I think my angle is a really unique one, and it's given me kind of a neat little niche in the industry.
So when you purchased that original revolver, were they aware at all of what they had?
I mean, they were.
Or were they like, oh, it's $20, it's a paperweight?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't quite that cheap. I don't know. I think I paid $200 or $250 for it at the time. I mean, I think broadly speaking, they knew what they had, but I don't think anybody had sort of really dove into that story and unpacked it. People, the story of Rollin White and Smith & Wesson's founding was nothing new, but I think stepping back and looking at it from the perspective, say, of a business historian or an economic historian or a historian of technology, I don't know that anybody had ever done that. So it was Yeah, I will say, every historian stands on the shoulders of every historian that came before him or her, and
Yeah.
and I was definitely the same, but I was bringing something new to it. So it's been a ton of fun, and it's still to this day. I never know when people email me or call me on the phone and ask me a question. I never know what's going to come up.
So do you still have it, by the way?
I do, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So when you kind of figured that out and you charted this path of going down the commercial historian way, were you doing anything else on the side, or were you like, I'm going to figure out a way to commercialize this on my own and go all in as an entrepreneur?
No, so I actually came out of a 25-year career in corporate IT. So
okay,
yeah, I was an IT guy, and I'm still do a lot of IT work, but I think I always knew that I wanted to figure out how to monetize this and turn it into kind of an economic entity of its own. But, I tried a couple of times to sit down and like write out a business plan. And it's sort of like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you have to just sort of listen to them. You have to throw something out and then listen to the market and see what people respond to. And, when I was really beating my head against the wall, it was because I was trying to force a particular product or service and not just kind of reacting to the market. And just being open to different things that come in. So like the expert witness consulting was a great example of that. I mean, they found me, I didn't find them, but all of a sudden I woke up in one morning and thought, this could be a viable sideline if I put a little bit of marketing into this and, talk about it a little bit more, work it into my CV. And I don't know that I'll ever be a full-time expert witness, but it's interesting work. And it takes me in directions I never would have imagined with this. My first expert witness job was helping with an innocence case, actually, in Chicago. It was kind of a dark story. Sort of long story short, there was a period in Chicago in the 1980s and 90s where police officers were, I'm going to delicately say, profiling young people and extracting confessions out of them using techniques that would not be considered legal by anybody, by any measure. Being pretty aggressive about that. And this particular case, there was a confession that had been extracted out of this person, and it had been written up. And this young man is about my age, and he's been in jail since he was, I think, 18 years old. And the attorney, this was kind of a Hail Mary toss, but the attorney said, hey, you're a gun expert, and none of us are. Can you look over this confession and just see what you see? And maybe there's nothing there.
Right.
And I started reading through it, and it was one of those things where I read it and I read it and I read it, and I had to kind of sleep on it for a few nights, and all of a sudden one night it hit me. This is a 16-year-old kid in Chicago who grew up on the South Side, probably from a pretty poor family. And in the confession, I noticed that the words 45 caliber automatic pistol were in there, and all of a sudden it sort of hit me. I thought, a 16-year-old kid from the South Side is not going to use that term. That's a very technical term. And actually, I went to my bookshelf. I pulled out I have an old service manual from the 1970s for a Colt automatic pistol that was used in the military. And 45 caliber automatic pistol. That was what was on the cover. And I was like, wait a second, those words came from somewhere, and it wasn't from the 16-year-old kid. And, I called up the attorney and I said, hey, were any of the police officers in the military that were interrogating him? And it turns out both of them were. Okay, those words came from somebody else. They did not come from this kid. Now, I'd love to say there was like this great Perry Mason moment in court, and there wasn't. These innocent cases take a long time to work through the courts, and this one's still working its way through. But that's the sort of thing that would fall in my lap. And if somebody had said to me 10 years ago, hey, do you think you're going to be doing expert witness work on a Chicago innocence case? No, I would have had no idea. But
and so now that's a whole line of work that you pursue more or less.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot more of that. A lot of the work centers around there's a strange line in American law. You could have two of the same firearm, one that was made in 1897 and one that was made in 1899. The one that was made in 1897 would be considered an antique firearm, and for the purposes of a lot of law, it's actually not a firearm. It's just a hunk of metal.
Okay.
And the same gun made in 1899 would be considered a firearm, under law, which, there's all sorts of things that brings into motion. So if you're going to sell it certainly across state lines, you would have to go through a licensed dealer and so on and so forth. So there's that magic line, 1898 in American law. Is it a firearm or is it just a hunk of metal? And I've gotten involved in a number of cases where it was a felon in possession, but there was a question of, what side of the line does this firearm fall on? Because that makes a big difference in a case like that. So it's, again, another curious aspect of this work that I never could have anticipated, but there it is. And
so 1897 or 1899?
1898 is actually the threshold.
Okay, so 1898 is the threshold.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing in doing your historical research and everything, you've kind of read into the laws and why they're in place and all this and that.
Yeah, I always say I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV, pretty convincingly sometimes. But yeah, I've had to do a lot of studying of the law and some of these really strange, and even the history of the law, because sometimes it's a question of this seems really strange, so we need to go back and understand how did this law come into being and what was the intent. So it's an interesting space to be in. And
so when you started getting these other layers within your company and your services provided, and they kind of just started falling into your lap, were you just going all in on them as they came up, or were you hesitant to say, no, I don't really do that, I'm not going to do this? Or
my temperamental tendency is to jump in immediately and say yes, and then to immediately feel this sort of imposter syndrome. And that's a real thing. You were asking about coaching entrepreneurs before, and that would be another piece of advice I would say is, imposter syndrome is a real thing. So, sometimes I struggle with that a little bit and sort of wonder, like, should I be here? Am I qualified to be here? But there's no such thing as having a degree in firearms history or being a certified firearms historian or anything like that. So, but yeah, I typically do jump in, and I just try to be very transparent with people and say, in the case of expert witness work, I'm not an attorney, but I am a degreed historian, so
you are an expert witness.
I am an expert witness. Courts have qualified me at the state and federal level as an expert witness. So, yeah.
So you get your first revolver, you get this itch, and you start to pursue it. What's like the next piece that you found that kind of continued you down this path? I was getting to that. Don't you put the cart before the horse here, Jay. I know you're eager over there.
Okay, we know who's excited to see.
We know who's excited to see some guns.
We know who's excited to see the registered Magnum. Oh, did
I've been staring at the bag the whole time. Believe me, I have not. We're working into that, Jay.
Yeah. So
a whiteboard topics show order.
Time out, Jay. Time out. just breathe, man. Just breathe. It's okay. We're gonna get there.
Where are the guns? So anyhow, your second piece that you located.
Yeah. So the second piece I located was a Smith & Wesson Model 1 because that's what I was writing my thesis on. I actually started out writing it on Rollin White, and then I realized there was just, it's hard to write about people who have been dead for 150 years, and people who
can't interview him.
Yeah, you can interview. I even tried. I went to his gravesite in, I want to say Lowell, Massachusetts, and I talked to him. He didn't say much to me, so it is what it is. But no, I pivoted my thesis, and I really focused more on Smith & Wesson, which became my real area of expertise. And of course, at that point, then I wanted the Smith & Wesson Model 1 revolver because that's where it all started. And then as I researched it more, I realized the Smith & Wesson Model 1, that's a whole family of firearms that was produced over 26 years. So then I wanted, each of the different Model 1s. So it, and that's another thing about my temperament is I am a collector. So if I have two, I want all of them. So.
And do you have all of them?
Most of them.
Okay.
So yeah, that's like a whole podcast for another day. But
going through each different model and everything.
Well, and this was so anything any innovation that comes out at first, there's version 1, there's 1.0. Let me put this in 2025 parlance. There's 1.0, there's 1.1, there's 1.2, there's 2.0, there's a bug fix for 2.0, there's 2.1. There's a whole evolution. So over that 26 years, I discovered that that looking at all these little engineering variations and understanding that, why did they change this? Why did they change that? that became a fascination. It's actually, I'm authoring a book right now just on the Smith & Wesson Model 1 and talking about all of these variations.
Oh, wow.
And even this year, we've discovered 2 more of them.
How are they just how are they not written somewhere already? Or, like, how are we just now discovering there were other guns manufactured like this?
Engineering's a strange thing. I mean, especially in the early days of a company, if I said to you, hey, Patty, tell me about all the iterations of your podcasting career and all the different ways that your podcasting room was set up and the format and the software you used. I mean, you'd have to pause and think about it because you didn't keep a diary or maybe you did.
On contraire, we have every episode recorded. I can always pull it back up and show it.
That's true.
But yes, I get the idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Most people don't stop and think 160 years from now, somebody's going to really care about the fact that we added a patent date onto the barrel of the revolver. And that's going to, for them, this is just another day in the office. So there was not a nice, neat set of records. So what often happens is, us collectors get together and, hey, man, I found this one and I found this one. And we'll sit and just look at them and, stare at it. It's like, wait a second, this spring or this thing looks different on this one. And then, of course, you're wondering, well, was that just an accident or was that a deliberate change? So it's a lot of trial and error. And something I discovered with my thesis research was I was also going back and reading a lot of the historical literature. So I found a magazine article in the 1940s that was talking about sort of the old Model 1 versus the new Model 1. And then another magazine article in the 50s talking about, we think there was maybe 2 or 3 different of the old variations. So over time, people have discovered, and again, historians stand on the shoulders of other historians. So I was... I did not personally discover all 26 variations, but I've added, I think, 2 or 3 to the mix now. So, but yeah, a lot of times it's just, guys at a gun show sitting in a hotel room that night, looking at them going, hey, George, this looks different than this one. Oh, cool, Fred, let me see that. And that's how a lot of these things are discovered.
Well, let's look at some that you've brought.
Absolutely.
And start just talking through what you have here in the studio. I'm excited to see. I was under the impression that he was bringing one. Turns out he's got multiple with him. So this is going to be pretty exciting, to say the least.
All right. So we're gonna be very scientific about this and go in chronological order.
Okay.
But I did bring.
Give me the ones that you're gonna. Well, over time we'll unveil them, and I'll put them on the center here.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna start with this one. This is the smallest of the lot.
Got it.
So this is a Smith & Wesson Model 1.
This is the Model 1.
This is not just a Model 1. This is the Model 1.
Wait, the very first revolver that Smith & Wesson.
So this is serial number 5.
So that's the 5th gun they ever manufactured.
This is the 5th metallic cartridge revolver ever made in the world. And the really interesting thing is we don't know if serial numbers 1 through 4 even exist. So this is right now
the earliest known.
This is the earliest known Smith & Wesson revolver in existence.
All right, this is pretty cool now.
It is. So this was we know that this was made in 1857. The Smith & Wesson Company was founded in November of 1856. They spent most of 1857 just building, well, presumably serial numbers 1 through 4. I mean, these were just prototypes. They were working through trying to get the design perfected. Serial number 5 and 6, which of course includes this gun, were actually what we would call tool room samples or tool room prototypes. And this was actually sent to another company in Springfield, Massachusetts, called the American Machine Works. The American Machine Works was actually making machine tools for Smith & Wesson to make guns. So, yeah, this was literally like one of the patterns that was used to make the tooling to make these guns.
So we don't even know if it was necessarily fired.
Yeah, it's been fired. Okay. I've taken it apart enough that I can see that somebody definitely fired this at some point. But yeah,
this is incredible. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that is the earliest known Smith & Wesson, and by extension, the earliest known metallic cartridge revolver in existence in the world.
This is insane.
And people sometimes ask me like, well, what if one of the earlier ones pops up? And I'm like, that'd be awesome. I want to see it. I want to see it.
You're not here to, say you lay claim to the earliest one.
Yeah.
It's just the one that is now known.
Exactly.
So what caliber was this?
So that was chambered in what we would now call 22 short.
Okay.
It was originally just we'll call it the Smith & Wesson 22. It was 22 rimfire black powder.
Okay.
So it was dimensionally identical to a modern 22 short, but you would never want to put a modern 22 short in that.
Oh no, the amount of gunpowder we pack in there.
Yeah,
nowadays
it would blow it to pieces, and that would not be a good thing.
Okay, yeah, here we go. Smith & Wesson, Springfield, Mass.
Yeah, Springfield, Massachusetts on the top.
Yeah. So where would the serial number be on this?
If you look at the bottom of the grip, you'll see a very, very...
A 5.
I hope your eyes are good.
I can see it. I will pick it up on camera.
Yeah, it's like a little dot.
It's like very little dot. Yeah. But okay, so just trust us.
Yeah.
But this is super cool.
The
So
serial
how does
number
it
5
open?
is stamped. It's on the bottom of the grip. It's on the back of the cylinder, and it's on the inside of the barrel.
We can take pictures. And make
Yeah. We'll take pictures and pop it up on
plenty
on
of
the,
B-roll.
on the screen.
Yeah.
So how does can I?
Yeah, here, I'll
Demonstrate.
Sure. So this generation of Smith & Wesson revolver are broadly called tip-ups, and the reason for that is you have this spring here.
Right.
If I pull that spring and carefully move the barrel up, it tips up.
Whoa. Okay.
So then, to load it, I would pull the hammer back ever so slightly, and the cylinder comes out. And you can put your 7 cartridges in the back of the cylinder,
Yeah.
and you would
So it's a 7. Okay.
put the
7
cylinder back in the
cylinder.
frame, and then you would tip
Okay.
the barrel back down. And then when you want to unload it, because of course, after
Still have the shells in there.
yeah,
right.
you still have the cartridges left in there. You can see this little rod on the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
And you would just pop the cartridges out that way.
Okay, that's cool.
It is cool.
So I have a much more modern revolver, and it's the principles remain unchanged.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing you have is, so I got like a Ruger 22 revolver,
Yep.
so same caliber as that,
Yep.
and it's you have one channel that you open, and then you have the same arm that will unload it, and you have to rotate the cartridge every time, or the chamber every time.
Yeah, so, and that's a great revolver. Ruger makes fantastic firearms. That was patterned after the what we've now called the Colt Peacemaker, the Colt Single Action Army, which came out in 1873. And that's, it's a very popular design, still to this day. It's a classic. But yeah, architecturally, it's a little bit different than this because, of course, the barrel doesn't tip up. That has the loading gate and the extracting rod, but not that different.
It's not. And so I noticed like the trigger as well. Like it's in a fixed position, so your hand fits it nicely. But it's almost like it's hidden.
It is. It's called a spur trigger. So the side of the frame sort of comes down here. You can see the brass on the side, and then the trigger is actually this steel piece in the middle here. So it you kind of pull back on that steel piece, and
that's what
it fires. It doesn't have a trigger guard, so not the safest gun in the world. You definitely wouldn't want to carry it cocked and loaded. But
I wouldn't. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely like a concealed size for sure. But I would imagine the first iteration of the revolver ever in the world, I would not want to keep in my pocket.
Yeah, and you make a good point, which a lot of it's usually the first thing that people say is like, it's so small, and in my thesis, what I discovered was one of the reasons that Smith & Wesson did so well from the start was they really saw the market for what we would now call the concealed carry kind of revolution, which a lot of people think of as sort of an 1980s, 1990s phenomenon. But during this time in the 1850s, cities were growing really, really rapidly. Of course, this was, well into the Industrial Revolution. A lot of people were leaving the farm and moving to the city. I guess it's not that different today. So cities were growing really rapidly, and municipal police departments really didn't exist in the way we think of them today. They existed, but it was not the today it's a much broader and more expansive, much bigger sort of service to the community now. So cities were really, really dangerous places, and people wanted small concealable weapons, and that's really what Smith & Wesson conceived here, was a small concealable weapon that you could put in your pocket. It was they weren't the first to do it, but I would say they were one of the first really, really commercially successful ones to do it.
That's insane. Here, I'll put it on the center table.
Please do.
If you want to work on the next one, I'm gonna play with this a little bit.
Okay, so we're gonna swing from really, really tiny to really big.
It's a really big revolver.
Really big. Yeah.
Welcome to the brand new Filia mobile app. We took all the same tech that's helped hundreds of people sell their homes themselves and packed it into an easy-to-use app for your phone. When you download the Filia mobile app on either the Apple or Android App Store, you'll immediately be able to see the power of this game-changing tool. From the seller's dashboard, you can navigate to all the information that you need. We intentionally separated everything into key groups, such as tasks to be completed, buyer leads for your listing, and contact information for everyone involved through closing. When you get an offer on your property, you can simply review and respond all within the app. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to monitor everything that's going on with your property from listed to sold. It's truly the power of Filia in the palm of your hand. Download the app and see for yourself. Filia, it's real estate reimagined.
Okay. So we're going to zoom ahead a couple of years. We're going to go into the 1890s now.
Oh, right.
So,
We're getting much older.
Much older, yeah.
Much
This
older,
is
of course.
practically brand new. So that was 1857. We're going into
1857, okay.
late 1880, 1887, 1888.
So this was 1857. I just want to
1857. Yeah. Pre-Civil War.
This is pre-Civil War.
Pre-Civil War.
The craftsmanship on this is incredible.
It is. It is
Like,
incredible.
Looking at this and knowing and having some modern or current firearms, right?
Yeah.
The mechanics
Yeah.
are like almost unchanged.
Yeah.
And like even like how some of the wood and the brass and everything is put together nowadays is so similar still. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we can move on.
It never gets old.
It's great.
Okay. So this is on the other end of the spectrum.
I see that. We've
This
got a
is
little
huge.
little bit different size.
Yeah. Just a little bit. Okay.
Hold it a little higher.
Okay. So this is a Smith & Wesson new Model 3. Okay.
This is the third model now.
This is the third model, and this is a new Model 3.
I mean, yeah. Now this is like what you are picturing in your Wild West movies. Very long barrel.
Oh, you have no idea how right you are about that. So this is a Smith & Wesson new Model 3. The Model 3, like the Model 1, was kind of a whole line of revolvers that came out. These were the large frame revolvers. These were the big caliber. Obviously, there's a lot of sort of Wild West connotations, a lot of military connotations because military tends to use bigger caliber stuff.
Right.
So this particular example was kind of the last of the great, what we would call single action revolvers that Smith & Wesson produced. Okay.
So having to pull the hammer back.
You have to
every time.
You have to pull the hammer back.
Yeah.
Exactly. Where we're going is to single double action, but this
We'll get there.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. But this is single action only. So you have to cock the hammer. The new Model 3 was sort of there was the Model 3 American, then there was the Model 3 Russian, then there was the Model 3 Schofield, which is probably the most famous of them. It was used by the American military for some years. And there was a couple of iterations of each of those, and then Smith & Wesson really took all of its kind of combined wisdom from all of those, and they came out with a new Model 3. This was an extraordinarily good revolver. It did very, very well for Smith & Wesson. This particular one looks pretty worn. It has a lot of wear and tear on it, but if you look closely at it, it's also engraved. It's actually really beautifully engraved. There was a number of engravers at the time that were typically either working in Massachusetts or New York. We think this one was engraved by Gustav Jung, who was one of the best engravers in the country at the time. So it was beautifully engraved, but what really makes this one special is there's some writing on the back strap.
Okay.
And it says William Sweeney, who probably doesn't mean anything to you.
Right.
From WFC, which stood for William Franklin Cody, or Buffalo Bill Cody.
Buffalo Bill Cody.
So this is a Buffalo Bill. This was presented by Buffalo Bill himself to William Sweeney, who was his band leader. So there was the whole Wild West show that, of course, Buffalo Bill ran for many, many years. It made him a fortune.
Yeah.
And William Sweeney was his band leader. And to bring this back to Baton Rouge, what's interesting when I did the research on this one, I discovered William Sweeney's father is buried just down the road at Baton Rouge National Cemetery.
No way.
Yeah. So the Sweeneys actually lived for some years in New Orleans and Baton Rouge.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So this was gifted by Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill was actually known to be a very generous guy. He loved to take care of his the guys working for him, his crew or his team. And William Sweeney was a really important part of that. Of course, this was a time when there was not, amplified music that, you couldn't plug your iPad into a speaker and play music. So the band was a really important part of the show. And William Sweeney conducted the band for almost the entire duration of Buffalo Bill's shows. And this was the presentation revolver. And, I like to say, Sweeney carried it like the West demanded. I mean, he did not baby this.
Hip and everything?
Yeah, he used this revolver. It's seen a lot of action. So,
wow.
So like I say, it's kind of on the other end of the spectrum from the Model 1.
Yeah.
So, here,
okay.
take a look. And look
So
at it.
What I noticed was all the engravings.
Yes.
And we're going to get some close-up shots of this because this is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
With just the
and that was
attention
all
to detail.
hand engraved with a chisel and a hammer.
A chisel and a hammer.
Chisel and a hammer. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And there was, how much room there was for error?
None.
Zero.
This is absolutely insane. Yeah. Okay, so
no, there was a number of engravers: Gustav Jung, Louis Daniel Nimschke. Obviously, a lot of them came from Europe and sort of brought that engraving tradition with them. But a lot of people would say this was from kind of the golden era of gun engraving. Just some of the most beautiful work.
This is absolutely crazy.
And again, all done by hand.
Yeah, like even here, the attention to detail.
Yeah.
And the consistency.
Yep.
Like the consistency within these carvings is absolutely just next level. So clearly this was 19,647. So now we've made some guns.
We've made
some
progress
revolvers here now.
And actually I'll add something in here. This frustrates people to know. It frustrates me to no end. Smith & Wesson started a new serial number range for every model. So,
So how does this one open?
Here, I'll show you. So this is what we call a top break.
Okay.
Because there's a barrel latch here, and you lift that up.
Got it.
And when you open it,
and it ejects it.
Yeah, there's an automatic shell extractor there.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
Then you load. Okay.
Yeah.
That's this is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so just pull that up.
Yeah.
And then shell ejection.
Yep. Keep pushing it.
Okay.
And it'll pop back down.
So you can reload.
Mm-hmm.
Dude. I'm a kid in a candy store right now. If you can't tell.
That was a big innovation for Smith & Wesson.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
And so serial numbers obviously match, right?
Yeah. Yep. Serial numbers match.
So this looks like a 45.
It's actually chambered in 44 Russian.
Oh,
pretty close.
My bad.
So here's
1 millimeter off.
So here was
1 millimeter off.
So here was the evolution. There was this whole evolution of these cartridges. You had 44 Russian, and that became 44 Special. They made it a little longer, a little more powerful, and then 44 Special became 44 Magnum in the 1950s. Yeah. So that is actually the predecessor to the modern 44 Magnum, which of course Dirty Harry fame. That's where everybody knows that from.
So this is not a real wooden stock either.
No, that's actually hard rubber.
Okay, that's what I was about to say. This feels
it's
rubber.
It's an early thermoplastic.
But you can tell that this gun has had a lot of use.
It's had a lot of use.
And it has had a lot of firings through it because of the wornness.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's been taken apart quite a few times too.
Yeah. No, Sweeney didn't baby that revolver.
Still,
he
still
used it.
so smooth.
It's still smooth, and it's still got Buffalo Bill's fingerprints on it.
Right.
Somewhere.
At some point, right? Yeah. Okay, and then you lock it down. So that got it. Man, like you cannot. It's not as
pull the hammer back a little bit.
Oh, okay. That would probably.
There you
go.
go.
That would probably help.
Yeah.
If I knew how to operate the thing, like that is just insane.
And that was actually really important because you saw with the Model 1 how much of a sort of ordeal it is to take the spent cartridges out. And I mean that really, again, that put Smith & Wesson like way ahead of the competition.
Do they still have some models that operate in the same fashion?
No, the top break revolvers, they actually made those until World War II. Not that exact model, but there were some double action versions of that they made until about World War II. In World War II, they ceased all production except for one model that was used by the military. And then after the war, there just wasn't the demand for those top breaks at that point.
So this was 18...
That was about 1880. I was trying to remember. 1880. Let's go with 1887.
1887.
1887-ish.
That sounds like a good year.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
But again, going back to with the first model of how the craftsmanship and the quality of this revolver and today's revolvers, like it's that phrase, they don't make them like they used to, even bears truth at this age.
Yeah, there's sort of an interesting anecdote. There was I won't name the manufacturer. There was a well-known gun manufacturer that some years ago wanted to reproduce a historic revolver, not that exact one, but one like that. And they got some examples of this particular revolver it was from about the same era, let's say the 1880s. And they couldn't figure out with modern technology how to make the parts accurate enough for the whole thing to work and not have the revolver cut $10,000 or whatever. I mean, they said, we don't know how they did it so consistently, so accurately 40 years ago or however long ago that was.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That, like, just because when you see etching and detail work like that now, 9 times out of 10 it's made by a machine, right?
Yep,
and so you expect that engineering precision and everything. And then when you look at that and you hold it and you look at what they did back then and how all done by hand, it really gives you an entirely different appreciation for like that piece is really an art piece.
Oh, it is.
The way it's designed, the
is fine art.
Is absolutely an art piece as opposed to a firearm.
Yep. No, and I mean, if you look at it under a strong glass or under a stereoscope, I mean, you can see they even sort of the depth of the cutting varied to give it shadowing. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And literally a hammer and a hand chisel.
And so this past year, we went out to Williamsburg and got to watch, and like going to the blacksmith was my favorite part. Getting to see them do that, the gunsmith, getting to see them do all that stuff with all that technology that they had at that time, and it was just absolutely incredible what they can do with that, given the right amount of time. To your point, they are selling their rifles and their pistols for north of $10,000 a piece because that's what it costs nowadays to do. And thinking back to then, that piece. Who knows? Do you have any economic history on what that piece would have cost at the time?
Yeah, a little bit. So here's where it gets tricky. I know that Model 1s were selling for a dealer price of about $9 or $10 back in, let's say, the 1860s.
So what does that equate to?
That's the hard part.
Jay, Google. What's the CPI calculator from 1860 to now for $9 US?
So I think most estimates, it works out to about $300 to $400 in modern currency.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But what about the Model 3s?
Yeah, the Model 3 would have cost a little bit more. In 1880s dollars, I want to say it was probably, dealer cost was probably closer to 15 or 20. Now, the engraving, that could probably double the cost of the revolver.
They might have paid $30 for that revolver, Jay.
Yeah, $30.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can confirm it said like $275 is $9 in 1860.
Yeah, CPI really only goes back reliably to, I want to say 1913s.
Yeah.
I mean, before that,
beyond that,
before that it gets a little bit squirrely, the cost of eggs or whatever.
Right,
but yeah.
That's okay.
Do you want one more?
Absolutely. We want one more. Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Lake Men's Health Center with Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group. Guys, I know it's tough to get out and go to the doctor. I know it's challenging to find time in our busy days, but I promise you, signing up to be a part of this group with Dr. Curtis Chastain and Dr. Tyler Boudreau, you won't regret it for several reasons, but most of those being the fact of the time it saves, where you're able to get in on the same day, get that appointment done, and spend that time you need to talk with them about what your health goals and concerns are, as well as ensuring that the financial investments you have, you will be able to live out and see those come to fruition. So if you're an investing guy, you know all about and planning for the future and investing in the future. There's no other more important thing to invest in than your health. Make sure you go check them out.
Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group Men's Health Center, and tell them Patty G sent you.
We could
Come
sit here till
on.
midnight.
Come on, don't do us like that.
Okay, so I'm gonna build up to this one a little bit. So
Oh,
we're gonna go.
jeez.
So we're gonna go to the 1930s now.
Whoa, we've just jumped, what, 50, 20, 30, 40 years?
Yeah,
Something like that?
yep. And we're gonna go into Prohibition.
We've jumped our life between these guns, Jay.
We have. Yep. So we're gonna go into Prohibition.
Okay.
There was this really interesting thing, and I love this historical angle to this. There's this really interesting phenomenon. You know, sometimes when you ban something, you unintentionally create a whole other industry. And with Prohibition, you know, there was guys running moonshine in their cars.
He's going to pull a Caddyshack decanter.
So there's guys driving, you know, running moonshine in their cars, and they realize that, gosh, you know, all this moonshine like weighs down the back of my car, and it's going a lot slower, and it makes it harder to run from the police. So, you know, people started kind of hot rodding their cars, and they would put a little more powerful engine in it, and they would beef up the back springs, but they wanted to keep it very stock looking. You see where I'm going with this?
Right.
And this became a problem for law enforcement for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, was that with these more powerful engines in these cars, people were able to get away from the police. The other thing that police realized was they did not have the guns that they were carrying at the time did not have the stopping power to stop a moving vehicle that was speeding away from the police to effectively penetrate the engine block. So the first part of this was actually the birth of NASCAR. That's where the whole stock car racing tradition, because, you know, you get young guys who are souping up cars, and eventually somebody's going to say, let's go race. And that was literally,
mine's quicker than yours. You know?
Literally the birth of stock car racing right there. But what also was happening at the time was there was a realization in law enforcement, up to including the FBI, that we need more firepower. So at the time, the standard law enforcement round was the .38 Special. You know, very, very well known. Smith & Wesson introduced it in 1899. I will say to this day, it's still one of the best calibers for people to start with. It's, you know, big enough that you can do some good work with it, but small enough that, you know, it doesn't knock you on your keister. But they needed something more powerful than the .38 Special, and that gave birth to the .357 Magnum.
Yeah, buddy.
Okay. So Smith & Wesson co-developed the .357 Magnum with, I think it was Winchester, and there was a number of really prominent people in the shooting community. Elmer Keith was probably the most well-known. Elmer Keith was sort of like the kind of the Annie Oakley of this period. He was an exhibition shooter, a superb marksman, and essentially Smith & Wesson did this kind of skunkworks project to create the .357 Magnum in conjunction with some others. And when they wanted to release this revolver, the gun that was made for this new super powerful car, this was going to be the most powerful handgun cartridge, they decided that they weren't just going to release a revolver. They were going to release a special revolver, and every one was going to be bespoke. So when you bought a .357 Magnum revolver, you wouldn't just say, I want a .357 Magnum. You would say, I want a .357 Magnum, and I want it to have a 6-inch barrel. I want it to have a Partridge front sight and a square notch rear sight, and I want it sighted at, let's say, 30 yards with .357 Magnum ammunition, 6 o'clock hold, and I want a 3-pound trigger for single action and a 9-pound trigger for double action, and so on and so forth. So every single...
They expected every person to be able to know all those different options.
For what it was priced at, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this was the top of the line. So this, you know, I always say now, this is like buying, you know, let's say a top of the line Mercedes or a 911. Like, you want to pick every little thing about that car. You don't.
So you know the follow up is, what did this gun cost?
Yeah. So these guns at the time were costing about $60 or $70 in 1930. Let's call it $1936. And just to give you an equivalent, you could go in and buy a .38 Military and Police, which was a very serviceable revolver. That was a really good revolver at the time, and that was about $30. So this was about twice the cost of what was already a really good revolver. The other thing that Smith & Wesson did with this that was really cool is when you ordered your Magnum, it got a unique registration number. So collectors now call these the registered Magnum. Okay.
Okay.
So it got a registration number, and when you got your revolver from Smith & Wesson, there was a little card that you would fill out, John Smith, 123 Main Street, whatever. And you would mail that postcard back to Smith & Wesson. You were kind of registering the gun, and Smith & Wesson would send you back a hand calligraphed certificate saying that, this was your gun. It was registered to you.
That's pretty cool.
It was really cool. So the problem with registered magnums was it was a really expensive program for Smith & Wesson to run because every gun was bespoke, every gun was different. They had to do these stupid certificates. So they only made about 6,500 of these revolvers. And then they said, you know what? We're not going to do the registration anymore. We're not going to do completely custom. They would still build custom guns for people, but they went to what we call catalog configurations, which was just, there was a couple standard configurations and you would pick the one you want. But this is an actual registered Magnum, one of the original from 1936. It was
Do you have the registration?
I actually don't have the registration certificate for it. We don't know if this one just wasn't registered, if somebody bought it and just, I don't know, they tossed the postcard or whatever, didn't know what to do with it. So unfortunately, the registration certificate didn't survive for this one. I can tell you collectors go bananas over these things. And if you have one with the original registration certificate
it's even worse.
and the box, it's even worse. But this is an original 357 Magnum revolver. Again, it's a phenomenally made revolver. This is going to feel a lot more familiar to you.
Yeah, well, now we've got the ability for it to...
Exactly.
$60 in 1930, about $1,200 today.
Yeah.
$1,200.
Yeah.
That's more like it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, see, now I know this, but you should still have... So they will empty out all 6.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a 6-shot revolver,
You've got
357.
the same style of ejecting all 6 shells.
Exactly.
And not the single ejection.
Yeah.
This is insane. And now we got the Made in USA stamp.
Yeah. Now we got the Made in USA. The top of the
What year is this?
1937, 36, 37 ish. Let's go with 37.
And this is still as smooth as can be.
Oh,
this does not feel.
I've shot that one. It is.
So this will shoot modern 357 shells.
Yep.
This doesn't feel like a gun that was made that long ago.
No, it doesn't.
But it has got some beef to it.
Yep.
This is a heavy one.
Yep. The walnut grips were not just walnut; they were Circassian walnut. It was the best walnut in the world. If you look at the top of the barrel, it actually had that sort of very, very fine serrating on it that was hand cut. And the idea was you wouldn't get glare off of the sun when you were looking down the sights of your revolver.
Yeah.
And it worked. That revolver, you can still go into a gun store today and buy a Smith & Wesson Model 27, which is what that revolver became over time.
And this is all still original parts.
All original.
That is crazy. But I guess it's we've got some firearms that have been passed down in the family, and it's true for firearms. It is one of those things that is not just necessarily tucked away in a shelf. It is preserved. It is maintained. Yep. You clean them regularly. You make sure that they operate and function properly. Yep. So I can see how over time this has still maintained the clean nature that it is. Even going back to the Model 1. Yeah. Yeah. Like it's just absolutely it's believable, right? So
and it's one of the things I love about historic firearms is you can handle them, you can hold them, you can work the mechanism on
you can shoot this one.
Yeah, you can shoot that one. A 90, 100, 150-year-old gun. And I think that's really important. That's actually part of what I love doing as a firearms historian is putting these guns in people's hands and letting them, kind of look it over and hold that piece of history. And, you're holding something that Horace Smith and Daniel Wesson made, or, Buffalo Bill, or the registered Magnum that was cherished by the FBI, it's fun history.
Yeah, it is really, really cool history. And it's also really neat to see the evolution over time, right? Yeah. Like, yes, this feels a lot more mechanical. Yeah. It feels there's a lot more to it from a component stance.
Oh yeah,
and you also feel the weight that it carries. Yep. But it's also not too much. So like it's still a comfortable weight, But as compared to those other two models, it's just it's night and day.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course you can fire that in single or double action. So you can, cock the hammer back or not. So it's a more complicated gun. It's definitely the most complicated of the three I bought, but
absolutely.
But if we went out to the range and you loaded it up, it would shoot.
We're only shooting this one. We're not shooting those two.
Yeah, those two I don't shoot.
Yeah. What else you got in that bag, man?
That's it.
This is incredible.
Well, I could come back. We can do another.
I know. I feel like we need to do at least another show and tell, man.
Yeah, man. We'll roll into World War II and the economic boom of the 50s
and so your focus is explicitly on Smith & Wesson.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the work. With Smith & Wesson, I actually do work with Smith & Wesson now. I consult to them as their historian. So I work with their marketing department, legal department, do lots of interesting work with them. So my deep scholarship is really on Smith & Wessons, but I collect and shoot lots of stuff. I kind of went through a 1911 phase and got interested in some European military guns, and I sort of dabble here and there, but I would call myself a scholar of Smith & Wesson history, but probably knowledgeable about a lot more than that. So
this episode of the Patty G Show is brought to you by Cortex. Cortex is the trusted technology partner for small businesses across Louisiana, delivering managed IT, cybersecurity, and smart strategies to help you leverage AI without the confusion. I mean, aren't we all confused by AI nowadays? As a locally owned company, we understand the challenges Louisiana businesses face and provide tailored solutions that keep your operations secure and efficient. Whether you're looking to strengthen your cybersecurity or explore how AI can give your business a competitive edge, Cortex is here to help. Be sure to mention the Patty G Show and receive a free cybersecurity risk and analysis to see where your business stands.
Yeah, this is absolutely incredible. And I know we could go on for hours and hours about this stuff.
Yeah.
But we do kind of have to start wrapping up.
We do.
So as we do, we ask every guest a set list of questions.
Absolutely.
The first one being, what is something you did as a kid you wish you could still do today?
Ride my bicycle without a helmet. That's the wrong answer.
No, that's a great answer.
It's amazing to me that as a kid, we rode our bikes without padding and helmets, and somehow we lived. We'd create these death-defying jumps that we'd ride our BMX bike. So, wow, I'm aging myself now. But what would I still want to do as a kid? I mean, gosh, just go out and ride my bike around the neighborhood and not worry about, I don't know, bills and adulting.
Everything else that comes along
Yeah, pretty
with
much.
life.
Yeah, and somebody cooks and does laundry for me. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
So what are 3 lessons you've learned along the way?
Ooh, that's a good question. 3 lessons I've learned along the way, and if I learned them, it probably means I made the mistake along the way. I think first is to be really, really curious about things. This all came about, my business, my thesis, just because I was curious. And sometimes people say to me, you're a historian, you must feel like you live in the wrong era. I'm like, no, I have the internet. I live in the right era. I love being able to pull up my phone and just look stuff up and be curious. So I think the first sort of piece, it was advice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first piece of advice I would say is just be curious, and it doesn't even have to be about history. There's a world of interesting things out there. And if you just dig in, I don't know, peek under the covers, do a little research. It's really interesting, the stories that come up. And I mean, ultimately as a historian, that's a lot of what I do is I tell interesting stories about people and things. And that really comes from a place of curiosity. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing I would say, especially to anybody that wants to be a historian, keep really fastidious notes. The undoing of some historians has been because they didn't keep good notes and they made an assertion and then they couldn't back it up. So, I guess if you're an accountant, you keep your records for an audit, same kind of thing. Be fastidious in your note-taking, write things down. I learned a long time ago that I learn best when I handwrite things. So I always have a notepad and a pen handy. So take lots of notes, write things down, and go back and consult with them. And the third piece of advice I would offer, life's too short to drink crappy coffee. So buy really good quality coffee. It's worth it.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what is something that you love about Baton Rouge?
Oh, I mean, what's not to love about Baton Rouge? I mean, the architecture is fantastic here. My wife and I are blessed to live in the Garden District. We just love it there. Sometimes walking our dog, we sort of look around and just go like, do we live here? Like, is this real? And I love being close to New Orleans, but I always say like New Orleans is like a great party, but like sometimes it's good to like, I don't know, just live a few doors down from the great party so you can get away from it when you want to. No, we love New Orleans and we love going there and hanging out. But we love that Baton Rouge has its own history. I always love telling people my house has been under 6 flags, including the Republic of West Florida. Like, who doesn't love that?
That's pretty cool.
That we live in this like narrow slice that we can literally say has been under 6 flags. I love being close to the Mississippi. I love the people of Baton Rouge. The culture here is fantastic. The musical traditions, the blues in Baton Rouge, become a huge Slim Harpo fan, and being close to Acadiana. So, I can go in one direction and je parle avec mes amis français, or I can go an hour east and I'm in New Orleans, or I can go an hour north and I'm in, Shreveport in a completely different part of the state. It's incredible. And my wife's a city girl. I'm a country boy. So we kind of have the best of all of those worlds in Baton Rouge. I don't know. Is that enough?
No, that's perfect. That's absolutely perfect.
I think the tourism department wants to hire you right now.
Yeah. We're gonna pull that bit and send it out.
Yeah,
to
historic firearms
department.
and Baton Rouge tourism.
Right. That's hand in hand, or hand in holster.
I like it.
What is something I can do to help you?
I love what I do with the historic firearms stuff. It actually, believe it or not, it's actually now taken me all over the world. I'm doing some work with some law enforcement agencies overseas. Actually, in France last month, I went and visited one of the only antique gun shops in France. That was really cool, and doing some work with him. But actually, nobody knows me in the local community as a firearms historian. And, one of the parts of my business I want to grow is doing public speaking, talking to people like this, doing show and tell, doing education. So I think, I've managed to establish myself in a lot of parts of the world, but nobody knows about me in Southern Louisiana. So, I mean, even just getting to come out and talking to you and showing you this stuff and telling you a little bit about my story and having you be interested, that's really cool. So I think, if you know somebody with an old gun and they want to learn more about it, or somebody that's looking for, say, an interesting keynote speaker, I've actually done keynotes about themes in leadership in gun history. So I think there's a lot of different directions we can go with it. That's a part of my business I'm actively trying to build right now.
Yeah, well, we'll see what we can do.
Love it.
Thank you so much for coming and bringing us your show and tell. Really, really eye-opening and very, very interesting.
And Patty, thanks for what you do for the Baton Rouge community. This is fantastic. I've watched some of your podcasts. I learned about some really neat businesses, and hope to see a lot more.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Everybody else for listening or watching, whatever platform you're consuming us on. Yeah, we got some pretty cool stuff here in Louisiana, specifically in Baton Rouge. So keep following along, keep staying and tuning into the show. Make sure you're following us, whether it's like, sharing, and subscribing, whatever it may be. We've got some great stuff happening all the time, all across industries. Like you said, it's the best place to live. So we'll see y'all next week.